Ignore those tire marks. Our delivery driver totally didn't get stuck in the backyard. So unfortunately for us, this means this whole thing has to get redone. So now we got to rip this whole thing out. Unfortunately, that is pond building and we will get over it. Good morning. It is another beautiful day here in East Setauket, Long Island. It's another beautiful fall day. The temperatures are perfect. And unfortunately, it's one of our last builds of the season, I think. But as always, it's going to be an amazing one. As you can see, the house behind me is beautiful. We're on a beautiful property. I'm going to show you guys around exactly what we're doing here and why we're doing it. So you guys stay tuned till the end. So entering this whole property, we have pretty good access. We have double gates here that lead us into this backyard. As you can see, the customer already took out all the sod. He was doing new sod in the backyard, but a smart thing was to just hold off on this area because this area will be the staging area where our boulders are, our fill dirt, and where our machine's going to be moving the most. We are going to ruin some grass up there, but it is construction. It is a little wet out here. This property doesn't get too much sun over here. The ground's super moist, and unfortunately, when the ground's soft, the machines tend to wreck it. But you can see over here, we are pumping out some water out of this basin. So this looks like a pond. It's actually not a pond. We've actually done maintenance on this waterfall. He called us earlier this year to do a leak diagnostic, also do a pump replacement because the pump wasn't working. So we swapped out the pump and we found out there's actually a pump vault right down in the middle. So this actually happens to be a pondless waterfall that they just dug down the reservoir super deep so it can hold water and look like a pond, but with no good filtration system or anything, you have this terrible looking algae. Once we replaced the pump, what actually happened was that he called us back to say that it was leaking. So we actually did a leak diagnostic test on this thing. We started tearing out some rock work over here, but this is actually primer, and these two liners are actually seamed together. There's no seam tape, there's no cover tape, and this happens to go all the way around there to this other side. So when this thing actually turns on and pulls up, we have all that water just coming out, leaving through the side, and this thing empties out within a few hours. And unfortunately, the only way for us to get to this is basically rip out all this stuff. But the thing with that is, I don't know if these guys seamed over here or anywhere else, so we might fix that and rip that out and then have another leak somewhere else. So we're just doing the 100% guaranteed solution, which is rip this thing out, make it look better, as well as make it not leak. So sometimes when we get phone calls about waterfall rebuilds, pond rebuilds, or even foundscapes, the number one question we always get is, why does a rebuild cost more than just a new installation? Because the hole's already dug, the rock's there already, you know, you just gotta just move the rocks around and fix it, right? Well, it's not that easy. So right now we're in this hole. You can see top of elevation right there. We've been just removing rock, tons of gravel. We have gravel in this super sack, gravel in that super sack, taking buckets of rock out. And when we're taking the spillway out, we realized whoever built this waterfall was using the backfill as kind of their landfill disposal. So you have a lot of like just garbage, like little shards of rocks, cobble, different types of rocks, all backfilled against this liner, no fabric. They just have a pipe here, and this is silicone around the pipe. There's no diffuser, so this just shoots out like a jet. But once that silicone fails, which I'm pretty sure it has, that's another leak right there. So when we get phone calls about, hey, my waterfall's leaking, can you just come out, fix it? I always tell customers there's no guarantee. It's like finding a needle in the haystack. I may find one, but that doesn't mean there's not more than one needle in this haystack. And unfortunately, in this scenario, I would have had to rip out this whole waterfall to find where that leak is. And by the time you get to getting machines out here, hiring the labor to tear this whole thing apart. It's just cheaper to rebuild it properly so it, one, functions, two, looks better, and it doesn't leak. And once again, we warranty all of our work, so you know it's gonna work. So if you guys recall in the beginning, I was talking about a bad seam causing a leak in this waterfall. As we're tearing it out, like I said, even if we fixed that one seam, we didn't know if there was another one in there. And would you know it? I'm lifting this area up, I'm removing rocks, and I see this little piece of cover tape right here. And if you see this cover tape's lifting, and I can stick my hand through this and see fabric. There's no seam tape used on this one. And then we have this seam up here that is also falling apart. As you can see, I could stick my hand in this one basically. So this whole thing, every single seam on this has failed. There's no fabric on top of this liner. And then while doing this, we saw that they used the pump vault. We accidentally squished it, but we expected to find aqua blocks since we saw the pump vault. Unfortunately, what we're finding is that they used one aqua block in front of the pump vault where the vents are. Everything else around this whole thing is just pea gravel and little rocks that we keep pulling out. So unfortunately, this reservoir isn't really sized as a pondless waterfall. That's why they built it as a pond, so it can hold more water just for this thing to run. Fortunately, that leaves the homeowner with severe algae problems because there's no filtration, and it's undesirable because this house he has here is actually a rental, and who's going to want to sit to nasty, stinky water because someone improperly built this waterfall? All right, that is the end of day one. We got this waterfall demoed and we got a reservoir in and we're ready for rock tomorrow. That was our goal. This is our 400-gallon reservoir. We have 12 large aqua blocks in here. Right there, we have our 20 by 15 piece of liner. We're not going all the way back there, but we like to oversize the liner just to give us that flexibility of building whatever we want. But we also put this here tonight because tomorrow is calling for thunderstorms. So if we can't work, we want to make sure all this water just sheds off into the basin instead of underneath the basin. Any hydrostatic pressure underneath this thing would cause it to pop up. But over here is basically our little landfill we started. We have this whole pile of rock. So this is what constructed the old waterfall. As you can see, it's a lot of little rock. They had some big boulders over there, but probably 2-3 big boulders. The rest of it was just the small rock. Took some plants out. We're gonna be taking out some more tomorrow to get our skid steer all the way back there because we're getting about 10 yards of soil. This is the old system. 1 aqua block, 1 pump vault, and then liner. Very little fabric. So when you put that all together, it's labor. I gotta dispose of it because I can't really use a lot of that small rock or gravel. I gotta throw away the old liner because we're definitely not using that. So when you add all that up, it becomes way more expensive than just doing a new installation because we could have just had this hole completely dug out by now, the reservoir in, and just using new rock that we already picked out. It's way easier, way faster than spending a full day of just demoing out this whole waterfall. That's it for today. We're basically done. This job site is like an hour away from home, so we're gonna head out a little earlier and then wrap this up today. And we'll catch you guys tomorrow in the rain. So if you remembered yesterday, we rushed to get that basin in because today we're supposed to get rain. Fortunately, we didn't get that much rain this morning so far, but doesn't matter. That was futile in our efforts in trying to get this basin not to pop out. So we have a 9-ton machine. Obviously, this is our only point of entrance. There was a sprinkler head right here buried in the ground that got pushed down. As you can see, this whole thing's flooded. We instructed the homeowner to turn off the irrigation, but to leave the water in the house running so we could fill up the basin. Yesterday we tried doing that, but the spigots to the house were turned off and the irrigation was left on. So we came to this muddy mess today. It hasn't even rained that bad. Our aqua blocks are pushed up due to hydrostatic pressure. Any hydrostatic pressure underneath this thing would cause it to pop up. And if I step on these, they all move around and it's just mud under there. So unfortunately for us, this means this whole thing has to get redone. So now we got to rip this whole thing out. It's going to set us back a few hours before we can even start building. So we thought we were in a good spot. Now we're not. Unfortunately, that is pond building and we will get over it. We'll pop this basin out. It'll take us a few hours to reset everything, get some dry dirt underneath there. Luckily, we have 10 yards of dry dirt coming in, so we can put some of that down there, pack it in. But this basin definitely has to get rebuilt now because of this.